I came back to Michigan, and it was funny. The company that I wanted to get a job with was this kind of ties back a little bit. The guy that did all of our framing for the company that I worked for was Crescendo Homes here in Michigan, and he was a framing contractor. He also had trim contractors that worked for him. They did the framing and the trim work for all the houses. He knew a guy that was with a company called Edward Rose and Sons. They're a large national apartment builder. They've built apartments all over the United States, and this would have been a job in their office. So I went and interviewed for it. I met a guy there that would be my boss. He was the purchasing manager. And it was interesting because you had to take one of the Wonderlic tests. I don't know if you know what those are. Mm-mm. They give you 50 questions, and you've got to score a certain number on these 50 questions, and you only have like 12 minutes for the whole test. So that basically boils down to you got to get 4 questions, 4.5 questions answered per minute, which boils down to you got like 15 seconds or 11, 12 seconds or whatever to get the answer on the sheet of paper. So I took the test and I'm going through it, and you have to reread something, you have to, and I only got like 40 of them done. And I think you were whatever the percentage was, you couldn't score below 80% or something like that, and I scored just below where I needed to be, but I just took it wrong. I didn't know how to take it.
And this was in pursuit of this job.
Pursuit of this job. So a piece of advice out there: if anybody ever makes you take a Wonderlic test, then what you want to do is go through it as fast as you can. If you can't answer that question, skip it. And just keep, because there's tons of them that are easy. You can answer in 3-4 seconds.
Yeah.
There's tons of them that are like that, but it's the ones that you get stuck on that you waste your time.
Yeah.
So go through, get all the answers done, and then just make sure you're coloring the right line item when you're doing your question, and then go back through and try to answer as many of the ones you skipped. And then I passed it. They let me take it a second time, which was a blessing, because they normally don't do that. But I know that, again, the guy that was going to be my boss liked me.
Yeah.
So that's why it's important to be likable.
Yeah.
But I took the test again, and I went to work for them in purchasing, where I learned a lot more about I learned a lot more about multifamily, because these were apartment buildings we were building.
Okay, cool.
They worked us hard, but they paid well, and all the contractors always got paid every 2 weeks. They were like a well-oiled machine, kind of like the same way as Fox and Jacobs was for residential houses.
Good.
When I was down there, so I learned that end of things.
How long were you there?
Just a year.
Just a year. Is that before you opened your business?
No, I had a custom home builder that, and he never told me who told him about me, but somebody
you're slowly
recommended
creeping into your niche. I'm paying attention.
Yes,
you're just accumulating one more step closer each time.
Absolutely. But the funny thing, one thing that I learned working for Edward Rose and Sons was humility, which is a very important thing. They worked everybody hard, but as long as you're doing your job and getting your job done, everything's great. My boss assigned me something. They had put some foundations in, I think it was in North Carolina maybe, and they had stopped framing because they still had a lot of vacancies in the buildings that were built already and everything else, so they stopped framing. All of a sudden, they started getting people moving in or whatever, and they needed to get these buildings built. So I had to contract a couple of buildings, and I had to get this lumber package contracted like in a day. So I sent the takeoffs out to all these companies, and back in those days we had fax. That was it. So we faxed them to the companies. They would get the takeoffs. They got back with me with pricing. When I'm on the phone with these guys, like their whole mentality was, you get at least 6 different bidders bidding this job. You look at the lowest number. You say the job's going to come in around this area. You need to get to this area to everybody else.
Yeah.
And then once you get them all to that area, maybe a couple of them just pass and drop out. But when you get the ones that you need to that area, you start whittling. You start looking. Hey, your plywood's a little higher than everybody else. See what you can do. Whatever the case may be, you work them down to get that number down as far as you can. And my boss told me, look, the last building we built in there was about $100,000 for framing. As you can see, prices have gone up.
I'd say so.
But these were big buildings. They were like 50-unit buildings, And he said, if you can get it down to that or within that range, close to that, contract them and lock it up. I had to have the paperwork to FedEx by 10 p.m. You had to in those days you had to drop it off to FedEx's office before 10 p.m. So I'm on the phones working like crazy till 9:30, and finally we resolved the contract, and I ended up coming in about $10,000 less than my boss told me I could contract it for, which is great. I'm doing my job.
Yeah.
So
about
I get
90,
it off.
about 90 is what you're saying?
Yeah, around 90-ish is where it was. So I get it. I get to FedEx at 5 minutes to 10. Get it off, and it's gone. It's contracted. So I get into work the next morning, and the guy who's the head of all construction calls me into his office, and he sits me down. I said, his name was Mike. I said, yeah, Mike, what's up? And he reaches down, he picks up a cabinet knob, and he goes, do you know what this is? And I said, yeah, that's a cabinet knob. And he said, do you know what we're paying for them? And I said, off the top of my head, I do not. I said, but I think it's around 26 cents each. And he goes, we're paying 31 cents each. He says, do you know what we were paying for them last year? And I said, no, I don't. And he said, we used to pay 19 cents for these. And I said, okay. And he said, I think we can be doing a little bit better job in purchasing, don't you? I thought I was going to get a little attaboy on the back, but I got a lesson in, what you're doing is good. I know that they felt that way, but you need to do better. You always need to do better. And humility is a good thing. It's a humbling factor. Somebody with a quick temper or something might have got up and said, F you, and walked out the door.
Yeah.
But
you understood where he was coming from.
I understood where he was coming from, and either I understood that, or he didn't know yet, one or the other, which is fine, and he didn't know that I was there that late or anything like that, which is fine. I don't care. I'm doing my job. That's all I care about, is doing my job to the best I can do. And no matter what you do, don't cheat yourself and say take shortcuts.
Yeah.
Do everything to the best you can do, and you will be successful in what you do.
Because it matters to you then. You can lay your head down at night knowing you did everything you could. Even if it doesn't pan out or you
100%.
get fired or whatever happens, you can't control those outside variables. You can only control what you do and how you feel at the end of the day.
100%. You're exactly right. And that's universal for no matter what you do. So I just put my head down and went back to work. That's all.
That's a great lesson.
Yeah, and my boss was excited and proud of me and everything, which made me feel good. But you move on.
Yeah.
Now, as I was working there, this was 1985. As I was working there in 1985, I got a phone call from a custom home builder. They wanted me to come in and interview for a project manager position. So I went in. I said, I'm going to keep my doors open. Let's see what this is. Let's see what this is about. I've run the field before. I know how to do that on production, but I never ran custom homes.
Yeah.
And these were, The name of the company is Nosen and Cohen. They're two builders. They were partnered up a long time ago. Each of them has their own individual business now, or for many years they've had their own individual business. But good people, and I worked for them, and they hired me as a project manager, and I was building in different. There was a big subdivision that we built in conjunction with a company called Selective Homes that was in West Bloomfield in the Maple and between Orchard Lake and Farmington, that area right there. So most of my job was in that subdivision, but we also had off-site custom homes that were being built as well. And I worked with them for 3 years, and at that time I was 29. So I had a couple of issues that I was very disappointed in with one of my bosses, and we had a couple of things. We had first of all, we built homes, and there was a period where we had a tile contractor that was handling everything, but there was a period of time where he couldn't keep up. So he asked me if I had a guy, and I said, well, I can price a guy in that I know, and I got him priced, and I got him in, and his price was higher than the contractor that we pay. And he says, well, I don't want to pay him more than the guy that we pay. He says, see if he'll do it for this price here. And I went to him and I said, well, to get the job, you got to do it at this price. He says, look, it's not worth it to me. I'm going to keep going where I'm at. He said, I gotta have this price. He came down a little bit, I think, or whatever. He says, I got to have at least this, otherwise I can't do it. So I went back to my boss. I told him, and he said, dang, we need somebody bad. He said, well, go ahead, hire him. I said, okay. So I hired him. He did the job, and he never got his last payment. And so, I asked about it, and he says, yeah. He says, I got it here on my desk. Don't worry, I'll get to it, and I'll get to him pretty soon. A couple of weeks later, he called me up. He says, hey, are you guys going to pay me that last payment? And I said, well, let me find out. I didn't know it didn't go out. And I checked again with the office, and he said, well, you know what? Call him up and bring him in. And I said, okay. So he comes in, and my boss is sitting at his desk, and he and I are sitting at the chairs behind the desk. And my boss was trying to squeeze him for the money back down to where my boss wanted it. And the guy said,
Wow.
look, no, I wouldn't have done the job. I told Tom that. And I know I told my boss that, and I didn't have to say anything. You don't need to reinforce that. You want to, first of all, your loyalty is normally to your boss, but you also have to have a loyalty inside
To
of
yourself.
you to integrity.
Yeah.
And so I was caught in the middle between my boss and integrity. So I remained silent in many things. I just wasn't saying anything to enhance either one of them. I just let them do the discussion, and finally he ended up paying him what he was entitled to. I felt good about that, but I think he lost faith or confidence in me because I wasn't backing him up.
Yeah.
And so be it. I mean, to me, my integrity is higher than any authority except for one.
It's what we just talked about, though.
Yeah.
You have to go to bed and be alone in those quiet thoughts of your own. You've got to look yourself in the mirror. He has nothing to do with any of that, right? So
that's exactly right. And that's another thing that I learned in the future, but I'll kind of bring it out now.
Yeah.
Is no matter if a person is one of the most wealthy people in the world, or if they're the ditch digger's assistant, everybody is equal. There's nobody that you treat differently than anybody else. You treat everybody the same. And I'll explain in a little while about that when I tell you about one of the real large houses, well, actually the largest house I ever built. But anyways, going forward with where we were, I had another incident. We had they do these events once in a while. I think they still do them once every few years. They're called Homerama, where they have builders build individual homes in a subdivision. Then they're open to the public for like about a month and a half or so, and then they're for sale or whatever. And they have decorating ideas, all kinds of stuff that goes on with them. So we had a big homeorama that we had to do in West Bloomfield at a subdivision called Autumn Ridge off of Orchard Lake Road. And it was big. There was I think there was 12 to 15 builders in it. There were a lot, and it's on one cul-de-sac. So you can imagine the traffic and trying to get in and out, cement trucks, whatever's going on. It was a mess. So there was a deadline that the homes had to be done by for homeorama. Out of that entire 12 or 15 builders, however many there were, only 2 builders made the deadline. So they backed it up for about 3 or 4 weeks. And then everybody was able to make that deadline.
Yeah.
And I know the question in your mind, yes, I was one of the 2 builders that made the deadline. So, I did the deadline. We punched out the house together, my 2 bosses and myself. We walked through and punched everything together. And we had about a 20-item list. There was things that had to be done, but they were minimal, nothing real big. There was a HVAC vent, a little bit crooked, stuff like that. But they made this list, and the house was done on time and everything else. They made this list at that time, and my boss said to me, he said, you made it on time and everything, but these were not done. Another lesson in humility. So I said, I'm aware of that, but fortunately we were granted this extra time, and I guarantee you in the next 4 weeks, every one of these items will be done. So it was done in the next day or 2.
Yeah.
But I had a little bit of a writing on the wall that that they're not appreciative of what I've been doing. So I resigned. And they got the model open. I said, I'll stay on board until you get another project manager, but I'm going to go into business for myself. I'm not going to work for somebody that's one of your competitors. So they were grateful for that. So I stayed on board, and I was able to go in about 3-4 weeks. They got somebody on board. And that's when I went into business for myself. And my ultimate goal, I knew after building these custom homes, is that's what I wanted to do. Is I wanted to go in and be a custom home builder.
Yeah.
But going into business at a time where I had very, very little savings, I wasn't making a huge amount of money, was challenging because I needed to get anything that I bid on. I needed to get something that was able to fund itself.
Yeah.
I couldn't put any funding into it.
Yeah.
So it was a little challenging, and I had a trade contractor that was a mutual contractor for another guy that was building custom homes. His name's Vito Pampalona. His company's called Vito Anthony Homes. And this is where I really became a true custom home builder. I talked to him. I went in. I had started actually this is when radon was getting. I needed to get some income coming in, so I had started a radon inspection business, and I was hooking up with realtors to do radon testing in new homes. And I was also doing home inspections, and this was before home inspections were the norm. It was rare if somebody said, I want to have a home inspection done. It was very rare, but it was just something that was new and just coming on. So I had a company that did that and did radon testing as part of the home inspection.
Okay.
And I was getting jobs, but they weren't. You don't make a lot of money on one. So if you could do a couple a day, you're going to do good and make a lot of money. But I was getting maybe a couple a week, so it was difficult. I put a lot of money into like a area flyer that went out through the mail to, and I invested several thousand in that. And didn't get many phone calls even. So I was still looking for build jobs. Anyways, I got paired up with Vito, and by coincidence, his brother-in-law and my brother were good friends. Total coincidence. And so he had a house that he needed to have closed in like 3 weeks. And he said, do you think you can do it? And this was, we met on a Saturday, I believe. And I said, well, can I go out and look at it tomorrow and let you know? And he said, sure. So I go out there to look at the house, and it was a disaster. It wasn't a disaster on what was completed. It was just a disaster because the whole house was a mess everywhere. So I had nothing to do that day anyways. So I got my broom out and shovel, and there was a trash can there, and I cleaned the house and just stacked material neatly and stuff like that. And then I went through and started making my list on the house, because now I can see things. I could see what needed to be done. So I was making a list on what needed to be done. And as I'm wrapping up, he shows up, and he looks around and he goes, wow, this place was a disaster this morning when I came by. And he said, did you clean this? And I said, yeah. I said, I had to. I wouldn't have been able to make a list if I didn't.
Yeah.
So anyways, we talked right there, and I said, look, it's going to be a crazy push, but if you give me all the contractors and if they're prepared, I think we can get it done. I'm not going to promise it to you, but I think we can. And he said, let's do it. And so he gave me all the contacts and everything. He had a guy that was supposedly supposed to be construction managing for him that was not working out real well, I guess.
Yeah.
And so we got it done. We got it closed, and he was thrilled. And it was a good balance, because his end of things was real estate and land and property and all that stuff. He used to own all the Century 21 Town and Countries, and he sold those to a gentleman named John Kirsten, who owned them for a long time and passed away just a few years ago. But that's where he started. He didn't want to be in the real estate business anymore. He wanted to he still had his own individual brokerage under Vito Anthony, but he got out of the let's say the retail real estate industry.
Yeah.
And so he said, well, let's build a spec house together. And I said, well, I got no funds for it. He said, don't worry, I'll fund it. You build it, and we'll see how it goes. So we built a nice spec house. We sold it during construction. And in the meantime, he was working with a customer for a custom home. The guy had brought plans in, and he says, hey, we got a custom home we can build. Do you want to do it? So we agreed to go forward together, and we set up an agreement, and we became partners. We actually kind of partnered the companies, Vito Anthony Homes and Rock Building Company, and we just went forward. And we are still partners to this day. Now he's getting up in age a little bit. He's not doing as much stuff in the field like he used to do, but he's a good man. He's doing a lot of things. He's a chairman of the board of directors for a military fund that he was one of the founding members of the board. It's a great fund. It's called the Yellow Ribbon Fund. He's had a lot of events here in Michigan, and it's a national charity that's headquartered out of Washington, so he has to go back and forth a lot. And it's a great fund. 91% of everything in that fund goes directly to the charity. There's no advertising. That's why nobody's ever heard of it. But the guys, all the board of directors, anybody that's in upper management for the Yellow Ribbon Fund, Most of them, and even in upper management, they are donating their money and time to the charity. Flying back and forth, he pays for every flight. He pays for the hotels he stays in. He pays for everything. So it's if you want to look it up, just look up Yellow Ribbon Fund online. You'll learn a lot about the charity. It's a great charity. I don't think there's anyone that has a higher percentage rate than that. But he's keeping busy. Every once in a while, he'll call me up and say, "Hey, I might have a chance to get a big house. Can we do it?" I said, "Just get it. We'll do it. Don't worry."
Yeah.
There's always a way. You can always find a way to get things done. That's the other thing. I have a strong faith in God, and I pray a lot. I don't pray for selfish things. I pray for help, assistance when I need it, and somehow, I always get what I need. So I have a strong faith in God, and I believe very strongly in God. So we went on. We built a kind of a large spec home that was a custom home. Sold that once we built it, and we just kept parlaying. And we built the one that he had that they came in with their own plan. We built his house, and then we were going into some smaller subdivisions and that where custom homes were going in, and we started building a lot of homes together. And we built strongly through the 90s into the early 2000s. We did a couple of commercial projects together. We went real well until about 2005, when the custom home market just started dropping off.
Yeah.
And at the time we got caught. We had a lot of models and specs on our hands, but we were blessed. We were able to get everybody paid one way or another. We didn't get our money out of it, which again, that goes to doing the right things. But there was a lot of builders
being prepared,
in those days,
saving, doing all the right things to make sure that if something did happen, you were prepared for it.
To that extent too, but more so in the industry. We had agreements with all of our contractors. Some of them came down a little bit on what we owed them, and we got them paid off. We were going to closings and having to bring checks to closings to make sure that everything got paid. We didn't get money out of the closing. We had to bring a check to the closing. So it was a difficult time and another very humbling time. But we got contractors paid up. Most builders that would have been in our position would have went bankrupt, went out of the business, and stiffed everybody. And a lot of them did in those days. It was bad. A lot of contractors, some contractors, lumber companies got stiffed for hundreds of thousands of dollars just from one client. That was a really, really tough time for the whole industry. But we stayed in business. We got through it. We got rid of all of our inventory, and really downsized. Those were the days where if somebody called me up and said, "Hey, I need to put some shelves in a closet," I'd go there in a heartbeat and get it done for them and say, "Just pay me this."
Yeah.
You're scrambling to do whatever you can.
Yeah.
And fortunately, I'm not as talented as my trade contractors, but I know the trades well enough where I can almost do anything. I can't do it as good as them, but I can do it decently.
Yeah.
So I would do stuff myself, any kind of repairs. I built decks, things like that. But we got through that time. Vito and I are still partners, and like I say, once in a while, he'll call me. But he's slowing down on that stuff. He wants to relax. He's traveling a lot, and that kind of stuff. So for the past 10, 12 years, I've been primarily doing all my homes through Rock Building Company. And I mentioned the other experience I had with the biggest house I ever built. That was, Vito and I were partners at the time, and it was a custom home up in Oakland Township. And the house was about 26,000 square feet, but there was like a mechanical house where there was a huge generator that operated the whole property. There was the water service came into the mechanical house. The electric service all came into the mechanical house, and then subfed to the house and subfed to a couple other buildings.
Yeah.
So it was an incredible project. And a house 26,000 square feet is just huge. The biggest one we've ever built. We built many in the range of like probably 9,000 to 16 or 17,000 square feet. We built a lot of houses in that range, and then a lot of houses that were those were individual custom, what we call design build homes, where they go through the process of an architect and the builder working together as a team on on designing and building the house. So I really honed my skills for custom home building during that time period from when we first started. And it's just again, it's simple. It's hard to explain, but it's simple because you got to have a lot of common sense. You got to know that if you put something in before something else that has to go in, you made a mistake. You got to tear out something to put something in now. If you can think of those things on the front end, well, wait a minute, I got to get it done this way because this has to go before that.
Yeah. All right, Tom. Well, I want to thank you for making the time to be here today and sharing so much of your knowledge with us. I want to end and recap just with a couple quick things for people to take home today. I always ask specific to the person's industry that they're in, because at the end of the day, you're going to be able to give better advice than anybody can in your particular industry. So if you were to go back to your 18, 19, 20, whatever it would be, year old self, and give him or that person at that time your advice on what you've learned over the course of your career in building homes or building custom homes, what would the 3 pieces of advice be for this particular industry?
For this particular industry, there's a lot of routes you can go. Find those routes. If you can, the construction industry is so big. If you want to build skyscrapers, you need to head toward commercial. You need to.
So find out all the routes that you can take.
And you know what? If I would have gone to commercial, I could have built skyscrapers. There's no question about that. It's just you got to figure out what your passion is in any industry. Yeah. And go that route. Anything you see that you think can help you for one way or another. If there's a seminar on something, if there's a class you think maybe you could take at a community college, anything like that may help you in that area. The main thing is to get a job in that industry and work. I don't care what you do.
Like you
I don't
did.
care
you
what
scaled.
you do. Absolutely. You could take the lowest rung on the ladder. Yeah. And I would never make anybody do anything that I wouldn't do. When I was cleaning basements for my uncle, and there was piles of crap all over the place in those basements. Yeah. It's part of the job. I shoveled them up. One time I threw up because it smelled so bad. Tile guy on the second floor said, what the heck smells so bad? I was in the basement. And I couldn't get any fresh air. And I was running to get out of the house, and I just lost it. Yeah. But I would never make anybody do anything that I wouldn't do. Yeah. But I know there's a lot of stuff that I did that most people wouldn't do. Sure. So always remember that. Don't treat anybody lower than you. Treat people, no matter what, at least on the same level of you, and hopefully on a higher level than yourself.
I hear you loud and clear. And right. I'm grateful for the conversation. The people at home are grateful to be able to learn from the years that you've been in business and how you did put all that time into figuring it out on your own. And that's going to hopefully help some people that are watching get there a little faster than maybe you did. And hopefully that gives you some good peace of mind knowing that you help some people. So, okay. Well, thank you for allowing me to share that with you. And I wish you a lot of good things on your journey on hope, with your business and trying to get people going. No, I appreciate it. Get them going on some of the things that you and I spoke about, because that will be really helpful to them. 100%. And guys, I want to thank you all for tuning in today. making the opportunity to learn, believing in the possibility that life can be better, and challenging yourself to grow. I believe everybody's pursuing what they feel to be their dream life, and hopefully today you got one step closer to that. We'll see you next time, and never stop pursuing precision. All right, everybody, so that is going to wrap up episode 13 with Tom Saracino. It was an unbelievable interview. Cannot wait to hear the feedback from what you guys learned from this episode. I'm now going to recap the top 3 things that I personally took from this interview. 1, start wherever you really can in the industry you're looking to get into. He talked about when he started out, he was sweeping floors, cleaning up all the dirt, the grime. It was a horrible beginning to his career. But what he did know is he wanted to build homes one day, and he needed to get around people that were doing that, get around the environment of the job site, and just start wherever he could in order to finally trampoline each step of the way to get to where he is today. 2, learn about your industry or the job that you're in as a whole, and not just the individual piece that you participate in. Tom went on to explain how important it was as he scaled through his career, moving up and continuing to gain more responsibility, that how important it was for him to understand how each piece of the puzzle, each piece of the business affected one another. And so he was more understanding in terms of how what he did was going to impact the next, and how he was able to make the whole business work better as a whole. 3, and I think personally this was the most impactful and most important one that he shared several times throughout this interview. Treat everybody as an equal. He talked about no matter what, if the person was sweeping floors, if they managed the entire project, if they were the president of the company, one thing that remained true to Tom from all these years is to treat everybody as an equal. No one was better than anybody else. And I think that's what's allowed him to stay in business and continue to do great work for his clients over time and keep contractors and all the things that come along with treating people as an equal. But I'll tell you what, it's very clear that this is how he's been able to stay in business and do such a good job for such a long time. I want to thank you guys one last time for tuning into episode 13 of the Pursuit of Precision podcast. We've got so many great guests coming up here soon, and I can't wait to share them all with you. We'll see you next time, and never stop pursuing precision.